Hi, my name is Adam and welcome once again to South Wales Ghost Watch. And on my show today we've got Lee as an additional guest and regular guest Martin on the show with me. And today we're going to be talking about Stonehenge. Now, so when was Stonehenge built, Martin?
Well, we think Stonehenge was built sometimes by those people, I suppose we can say 2000, 3000 BC. It's a bit sort of seen in different perspectives. But what we need to see is it far more representative of the culture of that peoples of Wessex. It's an attempt. It's built, massive amount of technology used to build it, but to show their understanding of the world they lived in. And I think the miracle of Stonehenge is that it was created, that it's useful, that it shows how possible the advance of humanity are, and it shows how we are continually looking for spiritual insights. That whole area, in fact, Stonehenge, Avebury, the Barrow at West Kennet, that whole culture is still there, and it forms a very vital historical period for us. So we need to look at it as a formulation of human's ability to understand, to use technology at a very early time.
Okay, so who actually built Stonehenge? It's my understanding that unusual techniques were used to build the structure in such a way that even supernatural forces may have been involved.
Well, do you want to comment on that?
Well, there have been some theories that because of the scale of Stonehenge itself and the difficulties of transporting, some of the stones. I mean, some of the stones, as we know, came from Pembrokeshire, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I think there have been modern day attempts to repeat, carrying those stones using what would have been considered the methods at the time, rafts by the Severn, and they haven't been successful. So some people have speculated that the builders of Stonehenge had some, external help. I'm not saying this is what I necessarily think, but in the form of, perhaps the extraterrestrials being involved in some way. That's one theory certainly, and but I think what Stonehenge does show is that ancient British people, Neolithic times, had a far more profoundly spiritual side than perhaps we can comprehend, because we think these, in many ways, quite technologically primitive people, and yet they were prepared to put enormous efforts, risking their lives, obviously. It was very dangerous work, hauling these big stones around. To create this monument. So it must have had, this wasn't just any old building. This must have been, I've heard arguments, a strong case being made that it was one of the major places of worship or what, for Neolithic people in Europe, because even though Britain is an island, people were always aware of its existence. Even going back many thousands of years, they knew it existed, and people lived here, and it must have been built there for a purpose. I think that's what I think. And whether the thing, what's really amazing about Stonehenge is we still don't know really why it was built. There are lots of theories. My favourite, preferred is astronomical alignment. Perhaps Martin can say more about that. Because that's quite common in the ancient world. We're going to talk about that later. Pyramids of Giza are based on, stars in the constellation of Orion, and I think, in fact, recently at Stonehenge, just on the outskirts of Stonehenge, they found a hieroglyph. That's something marked in the ground.
Yeah.
That's based on Orion, the constellation of Orion. So I think it must have, whatever it was, it must have had profound importance.
Yeah. I think what Lee said, and that's the point, isn't it? Is the spiritual unity of ancient traditional people. Isn't that amazing that people build that to link themselves in with nature and the structure of reality? Where did it come from, as Lee said? There's all sorts of explanations there. But the interesting thing is that humanity is continually reaching to try and understand their place in the cosmos, to understand the connections with Orion. And as you say, right across the world we have that. The world is a charged place full of spiritual energy that humans can contribute to and participate in. I mean, if you think about the comment of Iamblichus of Chalcis, who was an early Greek, he said that the tragedy of when the Roman Empire ceased to be, shall we say, pagan in that sense, he said, you Christians, and I'm not seeming to get it, if there's anybody here, you Christians have driven the gods and spirits from the world and made it in a lonely place. And we can see that massive spiritual thirst today. Ancient humans, the Neolithic people, wanted that connection where the world was alive and that they could participate in it.
Could I just ask something, Martin? I mean, so I take it predates the Druids.
It predates the Druids,
Stonehenge,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of arguments about the Druids. The Druids we know are an oral culture. They pass their information on orally. You learn it. But Stonehenge is... there is an association with the Druids in the sense that the ancient Wessex religion existed there, while to the Druids, Anglesey or Ynys Môn would have been the equivalent of it. And one of the most interesting stories ever, there's a trilogy of books written by Leonard Valentine Trimlett, which is called the Seed Bearers Trilogy, and it talks about how the idea of spirituality is passed on. And one of the traditions is that the first settlers, the first escape from Atlantis, they landed in the West Country and Wales, and one branch created the Druids and one branch created the, if you like, the traditional Wessex religion.
I see. Yeah.
So it's quite an interesting thing. I mean, there is an argument there. So they are connected. I mean, we should see Merlin as a shaman, yeah, who would have understood that position.
There was also an Arthurian legend that Merlin actually built Stonehenge.
It's very convenient, yes, precisely. There would have been cross-fertilisation from the Druids into that sort of tradition.
Right. Okay. So what's the theory behind Stonehenge being used as a place of healing or religious?
Well, let's look at a number of theories there. We have the idea of energies concentrated on the centre of. Yeah. We have the round circle. The round circle indicates continuation, healing, rebalancing. Circles do not end. Yeah. The idea of building something which connects with the sun, which we're probably going to talk about later,
yes,
indicates how healing is not a fixed state, but a state that comes and goes, and that the way to be healed is to put balance back into somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a belief at one stage that it was sacrificial, but people like to make up things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, any celebration of nature, anything that enables people to map where they are at a particular time of the year, anything that helps people to work together in a communal ritual is bound to be healing. I don't know if anyone wants to add any comments to that.
I think it's. I just like to sort of reiterate what I said before. I mean, this great project must have, the scale of it. That it took years to build. Involved thousands of people. And so its purpose must have been. I'm not sure we've actually even now understand this purpose. I think there's something hidden and lost, been suppressed because.
And in some belief they use it as an observatory to view the
sun.
Yeah,
there's some correlation.
There's some correlation.
What do you think, Martin?
Yeah, I think there's a correlation there. I think there's the idea that what you have to understand is that right across Europe and North Africa, there was this fascination with midsummer and midwinter. There is a very strong argument, of course, that the Stonehenge is about sunset on Midsummer Day, whereas Avebury is about sunrise. But the whole issue of whether it is, these are all speculations. Remember, we're trying to understand how the Wessex people perceived the world. Yeah. So this idea of balance, of trying to understand, of using it as a calendar, shows how important it is for humans to fix themselves into a model of the year. You know, these traditional festivals, midsummer, midwinter, autumn equinox, spring equinox,
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just about to reach to that point now.
Yeah, June 20th, is it?
June the 21st.
21st, yeah.
21st. Well, it depends, you know, you can balance about, you know, argue about it. But the point is, ancient people saw the year as an emergence of the Oak King and the Holly King. And for once, or you can see it as an aspect of the goddess. The idea of the power of the light and the dark. When the light and the dark, that at the moment of the longest day, nestling in it was the element of the shortest day, the darkness would return. And the reason I think we look at circles and healing is that this belief in the circle of birth, life and death. Wessex people see people come back, see the stars return, see the moon, the sun and so on.
Could it says Martin, the blue stones are from Pembroke?
Yeah,
Is
that's
it
interesting.
they were thought to have some interesting qualities?
That's right.
For ancient people with not obvious technological means to try and
I know.
somehow transport them 100 miles from
I know that
West
that's
Wales.
the incredible thing.
What
The
was
blue stones are
behind
interesting
that?
because I sometimes wonder, the colour blue is a very rare colour to ancient people.
Yeah.
The ancient Egyptians, for example, probably didn't have the colour blue. They probably talked about a blue-greeny. Yeah. But the idea of blue, the Egyptians used lapis lazuli as a. And I sometimes wonder if there is a cultural connection there, possibly with Atlantis, cultural belief that blue, or the idea of blue, is a unique colour. It's just a speculation.
Point of interest, where the blue stones are found in Pembroke, there has historically been a lot of UFO activity.
Really?
That is a fact. I'm not.
Well, I didn't know anything about that.
Okay, yeah. That's interesting.
Just throw that in. Sorry.
No, that's interesting.
So what do you think of the Christianity idea that the stones were brought from Ireland by the devil, and what's your theory on that?
What was the?
Go on.
No, the Christian. I mean, what's been the role of the Christian Church in Britain towards Stonehenge? Would you say?
Well,
The attitude, Martin.
I would say there have been two periods of looking at how the Christian Church would view traditional religion. Let's look at the context of how the Roman Empire changed from pagan to Christian. What we know is that throughout the Roman Empire there were what we call mystery cults. I don't mean cults in the modern sense of where people, but the idea was that you had to get to know yourself. And towards the end of the empire, towards the 3rd, 4th century, there was a savage spiritual thirst in the empire. And the idea was that there was something new needed. People had tried, there was the religion of Mithras, there was the religion of Isis, there was Christianity. And Christianity took a good 200 years to become dominant. The Emperor Constantine, who was converted to Christianity, became a Christian. But that was followed a few years later by the Emperor Julian, who was brought up as a Christian and then returned to a pagan belief, a Hellenistic belief. And he was basically concerned with the idea that all religions have value to somebody. He actually promoted Hellenism, tolerance. Now, in Britain at that time, there was the older religions, but Britain, once converted to Christianity, was of Celtic Christianity, where it respected the older faiths, but also said that Christ was the child of light, which fits in very well to the ancient Celtic legends as well. So there was an idea of continuation, that's fair enough. So they would have looked at the early stages, there wouldn't have been the same dislike. But by the time you get to the Emperor Theodosius, the idea is that all the ancient gods are wrong, or are demons and devils, so they should be suppressed. Celtic Christianity stressed things like nature, equality of men and women, equality of different sorts of things. So Stonehenge would have been seen as a historical development on the way. But it's after that, once you form the idea that one religion is right and one is wrong, you get a representation in the medieval church that anything that existed before was evil. So I suspect your story about the ancient, that was where the devil story came from.
Yeah.
Any creature with horns was seen as the devil. But if you look at Isaiah chapter 13, you'll see that Moses was supposed to have horns, because horns are a sign of wisdom. The idea of the Christian idea is obviously a misunderstanding that any guy with horns is the devil. And all religions, when a religion, when it supplants another religion, says the religion before is evil and sinful. So I'm afraid there's an awful lot of ignorance about the pre-Christian religions, and there's an awful lot of ignorance within Christianity about its own history. So, you know, that's where it comes from.
Okay. I mean, I understand there's a lot of burials in the area as well, isn't there? What can you say about that?
Well,
so I think you mean people's bodies just being found, or ritual burial?
Ritually buried.
In terms of what, they might have been sacrificed, or
yeah.
they just... I don't know about that, see. I know there are lots of... They found evidence of vast communities around the area who built, you know, were building, engaged in building it, you know, because it would have needed thousands of people, men, women and children, would all have been engaged in this for years. Ritual sacrifice, I mean, I think, to be honest, we have to accept that amongst Neolithic people, they did go on, ritual sacrifices would go on. They found evidence some in Scandinavia where, you know, people recovered in peat. And I think that there have been some discoveries around Stonehenge. I don't know how many though, that's the only thing. I suspect it would have only been, I don't know, but I know amongst some ancient people, say the Aztecs, it was you know, ritual sacrifices took place on a massive scale. But I think the Aztecs believed unless they sacrificed so many people every day, the sun wouldn't rise the next day. At least that's the story. Stonehenge, I don't know. I mean,
that's an interesting thing you say about that. That's why the Aztecs were so impressed by Christianity, because the Christian priests went on a lot about the blood of Christ.
Yeah. They liked the blood of the Aztecs, didn't they?
Yeah, and that issue about sacrifice is interesting. Sacrifice effectively means giving something up for the sake of something else. It doesn't necessarily mean taking a life.
Killing people.
Yeah, but it's one of those difficult words. Yeah. I mean, I'm not by, you know, and the idea of sacrificing a life for the rest, for the future, is something that still goes on.
This is the Wicker Man again.
It's the Wicker Man at all. And myself and Lee have...
We are going to talk about
it. I'm going to fall out now.
We'll fall out over the Wicker Man. But we'll talk about that. Yeah.
We are going to talk about witchcraft in a later show as well. Yeah. Okay. So what can you tell me about the summer solstice and the heel storm?
Do you want to do with that? What do I do with that?
I think that's your...
Okay. Summer solstice is at the time when the light is at its greatest. Yeah. It marks the time of year when we should celebrate. The days are longer. It tells us that the days of winter are far behind. But the idea of, and as you can see the light through the hailstone, yeah, if you like, that's like the concentration of it at that point.
Yes. Yeah.
So the idea is it's drawing attention of everybody around it to the fact that the light, I think it's 4:43, isn't it? In the morning.
Okay.
Yeah, or whenever.
That's the time the sun
I
rises.
think the sun rises.
It's perfectly aligned, Martin.
Perfectly aligned.
Wow.
Yeah. And that stone shows how much people were able to understand how the cosmos worked.
Their place in the universe.
Their place in the universe.
Would you say that these Neolithic people perhaps have a much greater understanding of their place in the universe?
Than we do.
Yeah, because it's assumed that people didn't know the world was round to a certain age, but I think we're finding them now. A lot of this is myth, that people actually have far more understanding of the fact, you know, of the earth and the heavens, you know.
That's right.
And there's evidence in Stonehenge for that.
That's right. That idea that, you know, perhaps we have lost that awareness of our role in the world, that we are a civilised animal, a more advanced animal perhaps than other animal life forms, but that nevertheless we form part of that whole cosmos.
Yes.
That it works on that.
Okay. I mean, in folklore, I understand that I've mentioned that Stonehenge is now a tourist attraction, but I understand that due to serious erosion of the stones, tourists are no longer able to touch the rocks themselves. I mean, and they can only venture short distances away from the site. Is that right?
Well, I think, can we do that, Lee, or do you want to?
Well, all I know is that because of I suppose they call it vandalism. At least the argument put forward, but I think, is it the National Trust
Yeah.
still own it? That because, you know, so many people want to visit it, obviously they leave refuse, and over time it has become, some of the stones have become loose, and it's become, so to protect it, access is more restricted than it was. Some people argue on the fringe that actually there are reasons why, they, you know, as if there's some secret they don't want people to find out, because the whole area is you know, bursting with all kinds of paranormal, you know, phenomena and stories and history, you know. So very, you know, everyone should visit the area and the surrounding area, you know, because you certainly, it's one of those places, a bit like Glastonbury actually, where you do get a feel of something being a bit different.
Yes.
But that's the National, you know, the National Trust. That's the argument they put forward for restricting activity, and it's a sensible one.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's a shame because, you know, it's something that's been lost. Perhaps people are losing something, but just not being able to be in direct contact with that, you know, amazing monuments and what they might have meant to people.
Yeah, I think, you know, you've got to protect a traditional historical monument. Because people may not understand what they are.
I mean, why do you think it's stood the test of time in so many respects, Stonehenge?
Well, it has captured something. I mean, Collier would have called it a thing of the collective unconscious.
Yeah,
it's something that captures attention, like the white horse. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's there. It shows how we thought before, and just as there is a fascination with how we existed and related to the past. There is that danger that people will lose, I suppose. See, there is a danger of commercialisation and destruction of creating false paths.
Isn't it true that actually it fell into disrepute and some of the stones have had to be re-erected?
They've been erected again, yes.
In the 19th century, the Romantic poets sort of rediscovered it, didn't they? Is this true? Or?
I did read about that. Yeah.
I mean, that return, the Gothic, the Romantic poet, the return to nature, the revulsion to industrial society. Yeah, it's all there, and I think it's very important we preserve things like that.
Of course, yeah, exactly. And it's a historical monument, like you said, you know. So, is there anything else you'd like to add, guys? On the
well, one thing I would add is that we're learning. It's one of these subjects where there are lots of different theories and answers, and any of them could be right. We still really don't know why it was built. We've got an idea of who built it and when. I think it's about 2,000. Is it 2,500 years ago? Somewhere around there. Was it 2,500 years BC?
3,000 BC, I think it was.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, but that's what we know. I mean, perhaps we'll never know. You know, but there may be a surprise along the way yet, you know, in terms of Stonehenge, I think.
The difficulty is trying to interpret what people meant in the past by the structures of what we think today. Yeah. We're all here interested in the paranormal and the unusual interpretation, but a lot of people would not be at all aware of what this was about. They would regard us as rather strange for being interested in those things.
Certainly.
You know, as I'm watching go through the X-Files again at the moment, I keep thinking that we'd all fit very well with spooky monsters.
Well, it's a fascination, isn't it?
So looking at things, looking for alternative explanations.
Yeah, of course, and we're all doing that, aren't we? So
we certainly are.
That's great. Well, thanks very much, guys, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It's been very nice talking to you.
Thank you.
That's all we've got time for tonight, guys. But tune in next week, where we're going to be discussing. I'm not going to tell you what the topic is. It's gone out of my head now. But tune in next week, and have a nice evening.